You are listening to Let's Talk Trio on podcasts. Keep up with the latest episodes by downloading the Podbean app or stream episodes via our social media accounts. Search for Let's Talk Trio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This podcast episode is brought to you by Longsdale Publishing. Is your program seeking ways to assess your students' college readiness? Does your program need a tool to document the effectiveness of your program? Longsdale Publishing is excited to offer the Strategic Learning Assessment, a 20-minute online assessment that provides recommendations and strategies to improve academic performance across 11 learning areas: communication, critical thinking, effective learning strategies, focus and concentration, growth mindset, persistence, seeking help, sense of belonging, stress management, test preparation, and time management. For as little as $3 per student, the Strategic Learning Assessment identifies strengths and areas for growth, along with tailored recommendations for each learning area. Want a complimentary sample account for yourself and 5 students? Contact Longsdale Publishing at 727-389-8026. Again, that number is 727-389-8026. Or visit our website for more information at www.longsdale.com. That website again is www.longsdale.com. Longsdale Publishing, your partner in student success. This episode is sponsored by Student Access. Student Access, the leader in TRIO software. Student Access is an online database solution that allows TRIO programs to track their students' information, connect with students by text messages, streamline the APR, and work from anywhere, all online, with automatic updates for changes from the Department of Education. Their technical support team includes former TRIO staff and has over 50 years of combined experience working with TRIO. Make it easier to focus on your priority, the students. For more information and to request a free demo, visit their website at www.studentaccess.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-801-1232. That website again is www.studentaccess.com or 1-800-801-1232. Be sure to share your favorite episodes on your social media by tapping that share button. This is a great way to support the podcast. Now here's your host, Juan Rivas.
Thank you, Amelia, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, Trio Nation, and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Trio. This is Season 7, Episode 32. I am your host, Juan Rivas. All month long, we are celebrating the TRIO programs and the massive year-round impact they have on our communities. Since regional and state associations celebrate TRIO days on various dates, we included links in the episode description to help you find and join an event near you. Before we begin, some community announcements. TRIO Nation, your voice is working. While Congress is moving to protect TRIO funding for 2026, we must remain vigilant. Administrative shifts still threaten the stability of TRIO grants. Take action now. Call your congressional representatives today. Thank them for their bipartisan support and urge them to ensure TRIO programs remain fully funded and operational without delay. Let them know TRIO works. North Carolina Central University is hosting their annual Student Access and Success Conference in April 2026. Click the link located in the episode description to learn more. In today's episode, we have Dr. Kevin David Linton, Director of the TRIO Student Support Services Program at Salem State University. Listen as Dr. Linton shares his educational journey as a first-generation student, joining the TRIO SSS program as a student in college, and hear him discuss his role as director for the TRIO SSS program. Coming up in just a bit, Dr. Kevin David Linton. A heartfelt thanks to our individual supporters, Angelica Villalpando, Rosario Riley, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Jeff Naputi, Angelica Valdez, Felicia Rivera, Eric Lemaster, Jeff Calden, and Jaded Electronics. Thank you to our corporate sponsors, TrioJoblist.com, Nosotros Education Center, Longsdale Publishing, Student Access, and TheTrioStore.com, powered by Proforma. Visit www.thetriostore.com, your source for TRIO graduation stoles. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can sponsor the Let's Talk TRIO podcast in one of three ways. Become a monthly patron on Patreon. Our base level starts at $1 a month. Become a corporate sponsor by placing an ad on the podcast. Contact us for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast business PayPal account. Our business handle is Let's Talk Trio. If you would like to nominate a participant, staff, or alumni to be in the podcast, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. Again, a great episode featuring Dr. Kevin David Linton, Director of the TRIO Student Support Services Program at Salem State University. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hi, TRIO Nation. My guest on the Let's Talk TRIO podcast is the director of the TRIO Student Support Services Program at Salem State University in Massachusetts. He obtained his bachelor's in English from the University of New Hampshire in 2010, obtained his master's in higher education from Salem State University in 2012, and a Ph.D. in educational studies focusing on higher education, counseling, and social justice from Lesley University in 2022. My guest entered as a first-generation college student. He has held several positions with TRIO as an assistant coordinator, student success counselor, and now director. When he is not busy helping students succeed, he enjoys movies, reading, spending time with his family and friends, and volunteering. We welcome to this podcast, Dr. Kevin David Linton.
Thank you, Juan, for having me. It's truly an honor to be here with you today.
It is an honor for us to receive you. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for doing this podcast session with us.
Thank you. The gratitude is mutual. I will say that anytime I have a chance to talk about TRIO, first-gen students, I think it's an opportunity well spent.
Absolutely. How are things on your end?
Busy, but in a good way. But in a good way. I just got back from a trip visiting family. Our students in our TRIO program are doing well. I'd say that the advocacy work right now is intense, as we all know, in TRIO Nation, as we call it. I think our program, our students, my team, we're energized and we're focused and we're ready to roll in 2026.
Wonderful. So you work in Salem, Massachusetts, as I found out through you, because you don't reside there. I made the mistake of thinking you live and work there, but you also reside in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Can you tell us a little bit about both Salem and Portsmouth? What do you like about that? For those of us who've never been, what is it like?
Sure. Well, that's what's unique about New England. All the states are on top of each other, probably.
Yeah.
Or I could hit Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. So I grew up in Massachusetts, and so I work at Salem State, and I love it. It's in the heart of Salem, Massachusetts, which is very much known for its history. You know, the Salem witch trials are obviously very well known. Halloween is our big time of year. Usually it runs from September through like December with all the tourists and all of that. But it's also, Salem's also steeped in a lot of other history, maritime history, history of activism, and a lot of community pride. So Salem's great. I highly recommend Salem, Massachusetts. And then I went to college as an undergrad in New Hampshire, the University of New Hampshire, which is about a stone's throw away from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is where I live. And again, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, it's another great seacoast town. You get the best of coastal New England up here and all the charm and seafood and all that. So I highly recommend it.
All right. What has 2025 taught you?
Nothing's guaranteed.
Nothing's
Definitely.
guaranteed.
Yeah, definitely in the trio world, professionally, just nationally, it's been a bouncy, bumpy year. Um, I'm sure we'll get into it later, just about challenges with funding, defending our programs, advocating for our students. I think also higher ed, there's certainly been I guess I describe an assault on higher education as well over the past year. And, that's certainly something that I've learned not to take for granted. Um, and through it all, though, between TRIO and defending higher ed and all of our work, I would say that one thing that I've learned from 2025 is that community is our greatest asset. So the resources we can build together, defend each other, support and advocate for one another as people, as members of humanity. That's our greatest asset, and that's certainly been one of the biggest lessons I've taken from the last year.
Wonderful. What are you hoping to achieve in 2026?
Oh, who knows? I would I mean, personally, I think I'd like to, we can talk a little bit about I know we're going to talk a little bit about my educational journey later, but I think I'd like to continue deepening my scholarship, my writing, particularly around equity in higher education. As far as other things professionally, I'd like to continue strengthening our TRIO program student retention, our graduation outcomes, and certainly expand advocacy, of our work around New England.
Now, during the intro, we shared that you enjoy movies, you enjoy reading, you enjoy doing a lot of things and volunteering. Can you give us a little bit a taste of like what is it that you enjoy doing the most? I know that it's hard to kind of rank any hobbies or interests, but
Right.
yeah, what is something that you're really passionate about and that you outside of work?
Right. I would say I really do love movies, and not to connect it back to work, but I think the reason why things like movies and reading and, all of that, why I'm drawn to it, because I've given a lot of thought about it recently, actually, is because I'm really drawn to stories and
Mm,
narratives, particularly around, you know, individuals, whether it's characters or, whatever the setting is, being resilient. So,
mm,
being able to, overcome challenges in their lives and, being successful and, beating back the villain or, whatever the
right.
story is. And I just feel drawn to that and sort of my outside of my work life. And I feel that it also, I don't think it's happenstance because I think that I think the same thing about, our programs and the students we work with and my own story that we're going to talk about. And, being able to connect, to that resilience and in that journey.
I've got not to veer off too much from the script, but
Sure.
uh, when did you realize that you really liked not only diving into books but also staying in the movie realms? Like, did that happen early on for you, or was that something you noticed later on in life? Yeah,
No, I think early on. I mean, I think so. I was wondering if you were going to ask me what my favorite movie was, so I
I was
was
gonna put you on
prepared.
the spot.
I was prepared, and then nobody knows how to answer, so I was preparing myself. I would
I
say
was winding up.
when I was very young, I was drawn into the Tolkien world. The Hobbit was like one of the first like big books I read, growing up, and I just, Lord of the Rings and, uh, so Lord of the Rings is my favorite, film trilogy, and I think that Um, growing up, and obviously Tolkien, it's a fantasy world, Lord of the Rings and Tolkien and all that. But I think that it kind of connects us as people to something, bigger than ourselves. We're all on our own journeys. We all have our own challenges and things that we have to overcome. And I think that just always spoke to me growing up, as I
Wow.
was, navigating my own life and, overcoming my own, challenges like we all do growing up.
Wonderful. I was so glad that you're prepared to answer that question because I was winding up for it and you just kind of beat me to the punch.
So I will say that that's not the first time I've been asked, and I've also seen things like this where, people are asked, and then, they can only narrow it down to like their top 10 movies, and,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
so I wanted to give it a head start. And I will say that, you know, I told you earlier before we started recording that I flew back from visiting family in Florida. I did download and was watching Lord of the Rings,
Right on.
on the plane. So that basically took me through my 3 hour flight. Actually, more than my 3 hour flight because it was the extended edition. But
Wonderful. So, Kevin, let's take a moment to reflect on your educational journey. Can you share with us your upbringing? What was that like, and what was your family like?
so my family was very supportive, and I'm very blessed and fortunate to have the family that I do. So I grew up in Lawrence, Massachusetts. I am a first generation college student. So I come from a family where they really valued hard work, integrity, earning what you have. And college was certainly encouraged growing up, but the
Hmm.
roadmap, how to get there, to get from point A to point B was definitely was less clear.
Hmm.
So there was a
Hmm.
lot of figuring things out as I went. Um, but I would say that, growing up, I did have a very supportive family who did believe in me as I, was trying to navigate, what I wanted to do in my life.
How would your family describe you?
Annoying. No, just kidding. Uh, I would say determined, goal-oriented and driven. Resilient, I think as well. Um, I think, from what they've observed and I've shared about, the work that I've done, my career, that I'm also, I think they describe me as deeply committed to people. I think those are things they'd say to my face. I mean, I don't know if I want to know what they would say, not to my face, but especially my sisters. But
What do you remember most about your childhood?
I
Oh,
was a
yeah.
middle child. I was well.
Oh, you were the middle child. Yeah.
Well, I was a
Please
middle
expand.
child, so that's why I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
joking about my sisters. Um, about what do I remember most about my childhood?
Yes.
I think definitely a lot of love in my family. I
Mm.
appreciate, and I still appreciate that to this day. That's certainly, made me who I am. I would say so. I am a middle child, so I do remember an older sister who and younger sister who both loved me very much. As I think about some childhood memories, I do remember, again, I mentioned movies already. I did a lot of reading. I was a huge fan of the Hardy Boy mysteries. So
Hmm.
I read a lot of those. I remember, being very committed to my schoolwork. I always saw school as I didn't know the end game, but I always did see school as a path for mobility, a
Hmm.
social mobility. So I was very committed to school and school projects and things like that. Very conscientious about those things. Um, and I guess other things I kind of remember are moments when teachers and mentors believed in me. That was always, I'm fortunate enough to say that that happened, relatively often. I had a lot of great teachers and guidance counselors and mentors who always encouraged me and pushed me and to reach my potential. So those are some of the good memories.
Wonderful. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Are you seeking guidance to enhance your TRIO project's effectiveness and success? Look no further. Nosotros Education Center, NEC, is here to empower your TRIO project with expert consulting services. NEC's mission is to promote the effectiveness and impact of TRIO programs. Since 2003, NEC has specialized in providing professional development and in-service staff trainings, allowable cost services, for TRIO projects across the country. The team at NEC, with over 60 years of combined TRIO experience, offers customized workshops and seminars for project staff, compliance assessments, external evaluations, working on and submitting APRs, database customization and training, development of policies and procedures manuals, and project implementation or reorganization services. Additionally, NEC has secured over $774 million in federal funding with a 92% success rate through their live and on-demand proposal workshops, assistance with data collection and review, detailed technical reviews, and comprehensive proposal development services. Join the hundreds of colleges, agencies, and TRIO projects across the country who benefited from NEC's expertise. Nosotros Education Center, your partner in TRIO's project success. Visit their website at nosotros.edu.org. Again, that's nosotrosedu.org.
And now, back to the podcast. Do you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up? Like, I know a lot of kids say like firefighter, policeman, all these things.
Boring.
Did you have?
Well, I wouldn't say boring because I don't want to offend anyone, but I always wanted to be I always wanted to be a teacher. Now that evolved because I remember, I think I was always looking at mentors and individuals that I admired. And as I mentioned, there were a lot of teachers that believed in me. So I feel like when I was in second grade, I wanted to be a second grade teacher. And then when I was in fifth grade, I wanted to be a fifth grade teacher. And then when I was in high school, I wanted to be a high school teacher. And so I think definitely I wanted to be a teacher. And going, from high school into college, the plan was to be a teacher, which we can talk about it in a little bit, but it certainly evolved where I transitioned more into I certainly kept with education, but my different goals in terms of what kind of career I wanted in education definitely evolved. But at the end of the day, I think I always knew I wanted to have some kind of impact for students.
Absolutely. Did you have a favorite subject or topic?
Yeah, I loved history and I loved English, which is why I sort of oscillated between, English as English teacher, history teacher. I also loved psychology. That always fascinated me because I always, felt like I wanted to understand people better. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, that sort of ran those interests, those subjects in school ran parallel with my evolving interests. I knew education. I knew maybe being a teacher. I thought maybe a guidance counselor. You have the psychology in there. Eventually, it evolved into student affairs and, being a TRIO professional. But, yeah, so those would be some of my favorite subjects.
Wonderful. Quite the evolution, though, right, in your career, which I know we'll get to here in a bit.
Yeah.
How did you prepare for your entry into high school? Were there any kind of things that you had to do or preparation
Sure.
in your mind that you had to make? Yeah.
Sure. I appreciated you sending that question ahead of time because I haven't thought about high school in a long time or preparing for high school. So I guess going back to eighth grade. And it gave me some time to reflect. And it's interesting because this spring will be 20 years that I've, graduated from high school, class of 2006.
Wow, congrats.
So,
Yeah.
thank you. Now 38 doesn't seem so old. 20 years ago it did. Um, honestly, I don't know if I fully understood what high school would require for me
Hmm.
academically or socially. I knew I was, going to go into high school, that I was about to. So our school system in the Lawrence Public Schools ran K through 8. I was literally in K through 8 in like one building for what, 9 years. So
Oh,
I knew
wow.
it was
Yeah.
going to be a big jump, and definitely going from eighth grade to ninth grade, you're going from the big fish, small pond, small fish, big pond. Um, I would say K through 8, that Lawrence public school system, that environment really shaped me. Uh,
Hmm.
Now Lawrence is very diverse, it's very resilient, it's very community oriented to this day. And so that's really shaped me. I think my preparation for high school was really about doing well in school as
Hmm.
best I could, listening to the adults around me, who
Hmm.
told me education mattered. So I knew high school was important. I did not know how much it would shape my future. So what's interesting, I transitioned a bit. So I started high school actually at a parochial school in Massachusetts. So I went from
Oh.
K through 8 public, Lawrence Public, to the parochial school there in Lawrence as well, Central Catholic. So that was a different dynamic as well. It was definitely rigorous, structured, a lot of, what you would think as far as a parochial school. My family, I was raised Catholic, so that while I did the public K through 8, the plan was, to do parochial school for high school.
Hmm.
Um, so it was definitely a big shift going from public to private, both culturally and academically. Um, but I think that it definitely helped with my structure as far as you can imagine, as far as being able to focus on school, focus on extracurriculars, have a plan. It was very much a college orient or college prep school. So
Oh,
I, I
wow.
did
Okay.
so I did that experience for only 2 years though. So at the end of my sophomore year, my family decided to move 2 hours north to Conway, New Hampshire. And
Hmm.
then so that was, beginning of my junior year. And so then I shifted back to the public high school up there. And so then I went from Lawrence, Mass, which is very urban, very, big city, to Conway, New Hampshire, which is rural New Hampshire, a ski town in the winters. And I think my graduating class was like 178 students.
Oh, wow.
So it was small. So the last 2 years of high school, I had the culture shift of, city to urban, Massachusetts to New Hampshire, and then, private back to public again. And so then those last 2 years were really about, finishing high school in a public school system in New Hampshire, learning to rebuild friendships. I went, right in the middle of high school, 16 years old, so that was a big transition, and really finding my footing. Obviously at that age in high school, you're still figuring out who you are. So leaving, one high school to another right in the middle, really, everything that you're familiar with changes. But that experience, from eighth grade, ninth grade, all the way through high school, that experience taught me about adaptability. It taught me about how to enter new spaces, how to observe, how to adjust, how to grow. And for me, I think those transitions really helped shape my own empathy as a person,
Hmm.
and a professional. Now when I work with trio students who are navigating transitions of their own, particularly from high school to first year of college, I have a lot of empathy about what that, feeling, what that feels like. Um, so yeah, those are just some of my thoughts about
Yeah.
middle school and high school and things I haven't thought about in a long time.
Now, you mentioned that getting into your first 2 years of high school, it was like a college prep program or a college kind of pathway.
Yeah.
Um, is that when, and even you mentioned before that your parents were very supportive about
Yeah.
you thinking about college. So this happened very early on. I'm going to adjust the question a little bit. At what point did a seriously thinking about college enter your mind?
I think that because I always wanted to be a teacher, and of course that changed in college, so when we get to college, I can talk about the transition there. But because I always wanted to be a teacher, growing up, the assumption was, because a little kid will tell, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a teacher. So
Hmm.
my teachers or my parents or my mentors, all of those individuals would tell me, well, you need to go to college.
Hmm.
Because, if you want to be a teacher, you have to have, your bachelor's, most cases, but, Massachusetts, certainly at the time, you needed your master's too, to be
Oh,
able to be a
wow.
teacher. So the implication or the assumption was if I wanted to go into education as a career, I would have to go to college. I think seriously, I would probably say late middle school, going into high school, definitely thought about it seriously. I knew for me, if my goal was to be a teacher, I needed a degree. So college was always on the table. And I also knew for me and my own goals and my own life that, again, education meant mobility. Um, so I think it was always on the table for me.
All right.
Now, I didn't actually, and we'll get into it in a little bit. I actually didn't have Trio as a guide. I am a Trio alum, which I know we'll talk about. But I didn't actually join Trio or even know about Trio till college. So
Oh,
I
so you
didn't
entered, yeah,
so I didn't have that growing up, but I did have, supportive guidance counselors, family, parents,
right
teachers.
on. And that actually is a great transition to this next question about what sort of support did you receive, encouragement, or even like a roadmap of what college would look like for you?
I think encouragement came mostly from teachers and my parents.
Hmm.
I did always feel like I was believed in, and I'm very grateful for that because I know not every student, unfortunately, gets that from, wherever they might be growing up. Um, I think I had some great mentors, particularly in high school when I got to New Hampshire, junior into senior year. I did have a wonderful guidance counselor who was very supportive and really demystified the college going process for me as far as financial aid, applying to college, essays, scholarships, all of that. So that certainly provided a roadmap for me. I won't say that there weren't a few wrong turns along the way, but I was very grateful for the guidance that I had.
What did your involvement in high school look like?
Oh, I was a nerd. So, academics first, definitely. I knew, even though I didn't know the point A to point B or the exact roadmap, I knew good grades, learning, doing well academically was going to open up some door, and I knew that door was going to be college. I didn't know where, I didn't know how, more importantly, but I knew that the grades and day to day was going to matter. So I think academics first. I did take on some leadership opportunities and activities that, helped build my confidence. I was just thinking about it earlier, this this week. So when I moved to New Hampshire, had to start in a new high school with a class that, had grown up with each other all their lives. I got involved in, extracurriculars there, student government. I ended up getting
Wow.
elected their senior class president, which was cool
Nice.
because they really didn't know me, until the end of junior year. So they had only known me for, 8 or 9 months.
Hmm.
Which I did enjoy. That was wicked cool. Although at every 5 year increments, so now we're at the 20th, I always have to plan our reunions. So I have to
Yeah.
figure that out. But no, I was definitely very involved in high school. I did Key Club, which is sort of a national civic engagement volunteering organization. So our high school, Kennett High School, up in Conway, New Hampshire, had its own chapter. So we did volunteering and so on and so forth.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you were very well-rounded, like very uh one, you had a college track in mind, but two, your involvement in high school, really a lengthy resume.
I guess looking back, I guess that's true. For me, I don't know if I did the activities and got involved because I was trying to build a resume for college applications, but I mean, it certainly worked out well that way. I think for me, the forefront, reasoning behind it was really just connecting with people and trying to, build a community and having that. But yeah, it certainly helped, when I, started thinking about college and where I might want to apply to.
Great kind of segue to that because the transition here is what schools made your list?
Sure. So again, at that point, I had done half of high school in Massachusetts, half of high school in New Hampshire. So I was definitely looking at the New England region.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. Plymouth State University in Plymouth, New Hampshire was one. I looked at Keene State in Keene, New Hampshire. I have some family out in Colorado as well. So I did look at a few of the big state universities out there and did a variety of college tours in the years leading up to my senior year. I looked at schools in Massachusetts. Ultimately, I decided on the University of New Hampshire for a few reasons. I think that I think it was broad enough that it gave me a lot of opportunities, particularly if I had, decided to change my major, which I did a couple times.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but so I think that I had that option. By that point, I had just finished living in New Hampshire for 2 years, those last 2 years of high school. So I had qualified for in-state tuition residency. So that was another important factor to think about as far as affordability. So
Hmm.
yeah, so ultimately, that was the short list. And I wound up at UNH.
Wonderful. What did graduating high school mean to you and to your family?
Oh, it was huge. It was definitely a lot of pride for my family. I remember my grandparents, a bunch of extended family flying in from around the country to attend. I think for me and for them, they saw it as, an accomplishment, but also certainly a doorway opening. Because of course at that point that May 1st, right before graduation, I had committed to the University of New Hampshire. So they also knew that, I was about to, start something really cool and new. So I think it was a great time to come together to celebrate and to recalibrate and, prepare for the journey and challenges ahead. As I mentioned, I was also senior class president, so I was also able to give our commencement speech for our high school graduation. So that was pretty neat too.
Awesome. So this next question, we talked about your preparation for high school. I want to get into your mind about what preparation steps did you take entering into the University of New Hampshire?
Sure. So as a first generation college student, you know, I didn't have a detailed roadmap. So a lot of my preparation was proactive, and self-driven. I had the emotional support. I had all the great support from my family, but I think as far as figuring out the details of understanding college applications, the FAFSA, deadlines, scholarships. That process was overwhelming at first. I
Mm-hmm.
did reach out, as I mentioned. I had a great guidance counselor. I still remember her, Colleen Watson, um, at Kennett High School, who was very supportive of me. Even then, at the time, I recognized, of course, guidance counselors are notoriously underpaid and their caseloads are way
Through the
too much.
roof. Yeah.
Remember being one of, hundreds and hundreds of students she was working with, but I always felt like an individual with her, not just a number. And so she helped me kind of understand that process. She knew I was first generation. So she knew that,
Mm-hmm.
I would need that, extra lift. And she helped me. And so between that and, being proactive, that was huge. Along the way, particularly when I had narrowed down the schools, I visited campuses, I went on college tours, I asked lots of questions whenever I could. I really didn't want to enter college. And then, of course, when I decided on UNH, I didn't want to enter UNH blindly. I wanted to have, some sense of, what was expected. Obviously, you can't fully prepare, whether you're first generation or not, your experience is always going to be your own experience and, unique to you and no one else's. And, you can't 100% prepare for it, but I did what I could.
Yeah.
I particularly really tried to mentally prepare myself. I remember that summer, leading up to, you know, freshman year at UNH, telling
Mm-hmm.
myself that, college was really not just about earning a degree. It was about changing the trajectory of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of being prepared for that. And also, as nervous as I was, trying to be excited about it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think looking back, just thinking about how I prepared for UNH, I think the biggest step I took, and this was evolving, and I think that it also continued when I got there that fall of 2006, and certainly once I connected with Trio and became a Trio student. But I think that the biggest step I took was deciding that I belonged there even in college,
Wonderful.
even if I did not always feel like that
Yeah.
uh, every moment.
Absolutely.
And then, of
I think
course,
it's one.
once I connected with Trio at UNH, that changed everything, and really put me on the path.
I love that. So, and not to take away from your story, because I want you to expand on this moment where you connected with Trio SSS. Love the little Star Wars mug, by the way. That was really awesome.
So I was gonna say with the stories and the high fantasy. I know I gave a nice shout out to Lord of the Rings, but I will say I love Star Wars as well. So this is Baby Yoda. I think he has a name now, but I'm still in the first season. But it says protect, attack, take naps, and it's Baby Yoda.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
So
So, talk about that moment you entered UNH.
sure.
What did this moment mean to you? And yeah, what resources did you connect with immediately?
So I think definitely a lot of excitement. Um, I think certainly excitement though, and I don't think anyone that's first generation listening in on this will be surprised. It was excitement mixed with imposter syndrome. Really
Oh, yeah.
not feeling like I belonged there. Again, I did well in high school. I got into UNH.
Hmm.
I graduated second in my class.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I knew I was academically strong, in terms of, on paper. But I think I still, no matter what, uh, I still felt imposter syndrome. I
Mm-hmm.
remember thinking, do I belong here? So I started, that was the question I was trying to really wrestle with, particularly those first probably critical 6 or 8 weeks
Mm-hmm.
of that first semester, which of course, as we know, working in higher ed, that is the critical time for, whether a student's going to be retained or not. So I was living it.
Yeah.
Um, and I was asking myself, do I belong here? And so I eventually connected with resources. I think really the first one I connected with them first at orientation, freshman orientation, and then as soon as I landed there that September, was TRIO, Student Support Services. Um, and they really helped me answer that question, do I belong here? And they answered it with a resounding yes. So, and I'm grateful for that to this day.
That's wonderful. Tell us about your experience. Yeah, really highlight what did you like about the TRIO program and what did you like about UNH? Those things
Sure.
kind of just combining. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I think with Trio, it was wonderful. And I'm still to this day, I'm connected with and actually serve with on a professional board my Trio counselor from 20 years ago.
Wow.
We've stayed in touch. I just saw him a few weeks ago. Having the counseling, having the tutoring, having the academic support. When I needed it, when I didn't need it, when I needed to be reminded of that I'm valued and I'm deserving to be there, having that trio, that first generation community, that was huge for me. It was
Mm-hmm.
definitely transformative. I found the mentors I needed. Over time, I found the confidence I needed.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to advocate for myself through the TRIO program. At UNH also, in addition to having the TRIO community, I was able to connect in many different ways with different mentors. I have some wonderful faculty members from even my first year of college, my first ever college professor, freshman year, first semester, Janet Pulaski. She since retired, lives in Portsmouth, and we stay in touch. Was really the first professor to ever believe in me, and that was huge for me, and inspired my confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for that. I remember for her final term paper, I wrote a paper, the paper for
Oh, of
the
course. Yeah.
course. The uh, she didn't tell me, but she submitted it in like the first year writing competition, and then at the end of that freshman year, I learned that I had won first prize, and then we were there
Wow.
and celebrated, and that from just, 10 months earlier when I was thinking in those first weeks of my first freshman year, am I going to drop out? Do I want to, can I do this? Can I be here? Having those people believe in you, that's huge. I have another wonderful mentor, Edie, who I, connected with freshman year and worked with freshman year all the way to senior year and am still in touch with to this day. 15 years later, dedicated my dissertation to. These were the kind of relationships I was able to build through UNH, through TRIO, and that definitely put me on the path of finishing my degree. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think what I anticipated at the time was that it would put me on the career and the life path, after college, and that I'm eternally grateful for.
Do you have a favorite memory at UNH, whether it's academic? I know you shared a little bit already about uh, this just experience with UNH, but yeah, do you have a favorite memory that sticks out?
Sure, and I guess maybe not specific. but I think I have a specific memory of period of time that so I identify as gay, and I came out in college, and I came out sophomore year, and by sophomore year, fall of sophomore year. So at that point, it had been a year since I had built a community of student classmates, colleagues. I had identified some great mentors who were very supportive of me. I had gotten involved on campus with student government, our student senate, our LGBT alliance. And I think at that point I was able to, for the first time, accept other aspects of my life that,
Mm,
for the time being, I wasn't dealing with. And, so I came out to my friends, my family, the UNH community, the TRIO community, and I got nothing but support.
that's
And so
wonderful.
I was very grateful for that. So that was definitely a good memory.
That's wonderful. You majored in English and minored in psychology, history, and Spanish.
Yeah, I
Was
was
there
all
a
over
particular, I mean, with the certain interest that you had, was there a particular field you were going toward? I know we talked about you being a teacher. The
Yep.
teacher path was really like it was solidifying in your mind. But was there, I guess, were you opening yourself up to different career paths that might not be teacher related?
So I think that I came in as a history major.
Hmm.
Um, I did that for a few years, along with the idea of being a history teacher. Um, by junior year, my history advisor, who I had just is the professor I had mentioned, Janet Pulaski, she basically pointed out, okay, so you're a junior, you've only taken like three history classes, but you've taken like nine English classes. So
Mm.
I think you want English. So I shifted to English. So, that sort of was the background of the English and the history. Either one, though, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, whether it was English teacher or history teacher. By junior year, I had narrowed it down to English, and I knew I wanted to be a high school teacher. The
Right on.
psychology and the Spanish, those were always minors. I think there was a short time where I thought about double majoring in psychology, along with the English, but I ended up settling on minors. What's interesting about it, and I'll say that I don't know if it was my full intentional plan, but it worked out this way, that between uh, all my courses for my English major and then my three minors, psychology, history, and Spanish, every single credit and course on my undergrad transcript is accounted for as either a gen ed, one of the three minors, and my major. So
Wow.
it all ended cleanly. Um,
Nice.
Certainly by my senior year, and I know we'll talk about grad school in a second. Certainly by my senior year, that's when I sort of transitioned from maybe not wanting to teach and then wondering what else I could do.
Yeah. So I'm going to stick to this point here then for a second because you realizing that you're about to graduate, at what
Mhm.
point did you think to yourself, I'm going to need more school? And very rare do first generation students think beyond the 4 year degree. It's like,
Right.
whoa, I might need more than just this degree.
So it's interesting because me and my trio colleagues talk about this all the time, and I appreciate and know it's true because I'm a first generation student. When you're first in your family for one thing, you're first in your family for everything. So I was the first in
Mm.
my family to get my bachelor's or to
Hmm.
pursue my bachelor's. It also would mean I would be the first to get, my master's, and then I didn't know at the time, but eventually the first to get my PhD. So I would say definitely junior into senior year. Uh, I was thinking about grad school.
Hmm.
The TRIO program had actually, that fall of my senior year, started offering GRE prep courses for TRIO participants. So I did do like a 6 week night course through the TRIO SSS program at UNH as a
Wow.
participant to prepare for the GRE. Um, and then took it, and then sort of at that point, I was like, all right, I'm applying for college or applying for graduate school, going for my
Hmm.
master's. Part of the journey and the question at that point was what did I want to do in grad school?
Oh, for
I
sure.
knew
Yeah.
at the time going into senior year, I had narrowed it down to something with education. I wanted to be an educator. I wanted to work at a school or an education setting. I just didn't know what.
And as I look at your accomplishments, so getting a master's, I also want to reflect with you. The moment you graduated from UNH, what did that moment mean to you? I know it's veering a little bit off and it wasn't included in this one, but I typically include this question. But it's a monumental thing. What did that moment mean to you and to your family?
Similar to 4 years earlier when I had graduated from high school, a lot of pride, a lot of seeing myself, a lot of my family and friends seeing that I had set a goal over a 4 year period, had achieved it, that I had opened doors for myself. I think there was a lot of pride with my family. At that point also, I had figured out, where I was going and, grad school and all that. So they also knew it was going to be, another stepping stone for me. But yeah, I think that there was a lot of pride and celebration. And I'll say that, there were moments where, even beyond freshman year of college, where, undergrad was tough. And so to be able to
Mm-hmm.
get through it and
Hmm.
finish it was an enormous success and something that, I'm very proud of.
Awesome. I know you already kind of covered some folks that mentored you through your program, but who served as your mentors, not only in college, but into your transition into the master's program?
Definitely trio staff at the University of New Hampshire. Being a trio participant, they helped with applying to grad school. They did workshops on grad school essays and so on and so forth. I mentioned the GRE prep course. I did that. They provided waivers as well, as far application waivers for the GRE for applying to grad programs. So having that support was enormous. The mentors and and faculty that I was able to build relationships with the 4 years, there at the university, were also enormously supportive as I thought about applying to graduate school.
That's awesome. So you've held different roles within Trio, and this is speaking to uh, you're in your master's program at the moment. You're holding just
Mhm.
different positions in Trio. How did you juggle all that? I mean, that
Yeah.
feels overwhelming already, just me saying it.
Yeah. So, it was definitely a journey. So I would say that, part of so I got my master's at Salem State, uh, which is where I work now. So once when I graduated from the University in New Hampshire, I went right into my master's program, higher ed student affairs, at Salem State. I got a grad assistantship there, which was huge. I actually got the grad assistantship with the TRIO program. Uh, and so, the program took 2 years. I was working at the same time, not making a lot of money. Um, I would say that it had a lot to do with, as far as the juggling and, doing, grad school while working. It
Hmm.
was important to, find your support system. It was important to, set boundaries, to block out your time, your routine, and to really hold on to the belief that it was worth it. because for me, getting that master's, and I didn't know at the time that I would stay at Salem State and transition from being a grad assistant to my, assistant coordinator there. But I did know that finishing this master's was going to be the transition into my first full-time job, the launch of my career, salary and benefits, and that the stakes were high. Now, it just so happens that about 2 months before I was about to finish my master's at Salem State and my grad assistantship with Trio, that an assistant coordinator full-time position opened up at Trio at Salem State. I applied, and then that July 1st after graduation, I
Wow.
started, and that was 14 years ago.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
since there, I've been assistant director, coordinator,
Yeah.
student success counselor, and now director. So it's been a journey.
So you were juggling work, a master's
Mhm.
program. How did you find time to work, go to school, and still care for yourself?
I think that it's very important to practice self-care. I think, we always have to fill ourselves up. I think we also have to prioritize what matters to us. Obviously, at the time, my education, really mattered to me. Again, I saw it as, social mobility and being
Hmm.
able to move forward, launch my career. At the same time, I had some very important friends and family and, relationships that I wanted to continue to nurture. I also wanted to, make a good impression in my grad assistantship and ultimately, my job, because I knew that those connections mattered too and could open doors, which of course they ultimately did. I know when we talk about, we'll talk a little bit about my doctoral work, but my PhD took 7 years. And so I was
Wow.
definitely doing that I was already full time with Trio. So that was certainly a balance as far as boundary setting, setting goals, keeping your eyes on the prize, all of that.
Can you share with our audience the difference between the undergraduate and graduate studies? What did it, what noticeable difference did you make as a first generation student? What
Mhm.
did that mean? Because some of our students or some of the folks listening are thinking about getting a master's program
Right.
or getting into a master's program.
So as someone that has experienced it at all levels, undergrad, grad, and doctoral studies, and has also supported students on that journey too, professionally, I would say undergrad is really structured. You have a clear, um, what do I want to call it? A clear flow sheet, a program of study. You have specific milestones. And I think your undergrad experience is meant to and is designed to, no matter where you go. Um, it's designed to ask you a very specific question, or to answer a very specific question. What should you know? Your undergrad
Mm,
studies are asking you what should you know, and then you go
mhm,
through your content, and your foundational, all of that, and then of course depending on your age, if you're a traditional 18-year-old or non-traditional older student, you're also going through a whole other bunch of things during that time period as well. I think for graduate school, whether it's your master's or your doctoral studies, which are of course much more focused and on a specific discipline and specialty, I think that it transitions from that undergrad question of, or trying to answer what should you know. Graduate school's really asking you now, what do you think? It's making you think
oh,
about
wow.
the work. It's making you think about uh, what matters to you. It's making you apply what you're learning to your potential career. So
Wow.
that's how I would distinguish those. And then and then, going for your PhD, it's, how do you want to contribute in your own research and, kind of pushes it even, further.
Absolutely.
I will say interestingly that, and I've thought about this, and no one ever believes me when I tell them this, but I feel that emotionally, developmentally, however you want to describe it, and I think this might be true as a first generation student or even not as a first generation student. I think that emotionally, developmentally, undergrad's the hardest. And
Mm.
then I think master's, it's easier. And then I think PhD, it's even easier because you're very
Wow.
focused.
I
Uh,
like the perspective.
I think academically, you know, honestly, I think graduate school also allows you to focus maybe more on things that you're applying to specific programs, things that you're interested in. You don't have to take intro to whatever, just because it's a gen ed. So I think that for those interested in graduate school, if you're nervous, whether you're first generation or not, I would say that I feel that, at least with my own experience, and granted it's not universal necessarily, uh, the emotional, the developmental, the intellectual push, I think a lot of those pieces are harder as an undergrad. Now, I think the work and the expectations, in terms of your writing and, your discipline are, it's, higher at the master's and graduate and doctoral level.
For sure.
But looking back, my tough times were never in my graduate programs.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And to take your reflection a little bit further, what did being in the master's program teach you about yourself?
I think resilience, one thing. Uh, so I did my master's program right out of undergrad. So I was
Hmm. Hmm.
22. I just got my first apartment. I don't even remember how I paid for that apartment because I had no money. I had a grad assistantship. It was challenging times, and you're in that. I guess I'll go back to my Catholic roots in Catholic school. You're in that purgatory of you're out of undergrad, you're 22, but you're not quite in your career or even considered an adult really. And I
Mm,
think
hmm.
that so that was tough, So I think being
Yeah,
able to push through that, do things without, health insurance and, all the things that you get when you get that first job, professional
for sure.
job. That in between space was tough, but I pushed through. It was resilient. I was resilient. Um, and again, I think it also reiterated for me, doing well in my master's program, successfully completing that I belonged. I belonged in the arena.
Absolutely. You majored in higher education and student affairs. What drew you to this program?
So senior year of college, as I mentioned, was a turning point for me as far as thinking about what I might want to pursue professionally. So I got to a point where I didn't want to be a teacher. So then I was like, what am I going to do with this English degree? And I thought about how I did want to be an educator, and I knew I wanted to work in some educational setting. I
Hmm.
eventually settled on guidance counseling. Um, but then as I moved forward, particularly, and it all happened pretty rapidly,
Hmm.
senior year, I was preparing for the GREs. I was looking at different graduate programs. I was applying to guidance counseling programs, but I was also, it was probably junior into senior year, and again, I mentioned I was very involved in student government, student senate, all of
Hmm.
that. That also gave me the opportunity to meet the dean of students and, individuals working in higher ed. And I got to a point where I'm like, and of course, trio all along. the trio program at UNH. And I got to a point junior into senior year where I'm like, there's a lot of adults that work here. And I'm like, what did they study that allowed them to work at a college? And
Yeah.
so I went to a workshop where they were doing some kind of, learn about student affairs. I talked to different individuals that I got to meet along the way. They talked about their journey and how higher ed became a career for them. I talked to, individuals working in Trio, learned about how that career, transpired for them. And then I was like, oh, student affairs could be a cool master's program. So I
Hmm.
applied to a few of those. And then eventually what happened was, I remember it was like a January 1st deadline or something like that of my senior year. It came down to I applied to two programs at Salem State, a master's in higher ed student affairs and a master's in school counseling.
Oh,
And I just picked one. And I guess at the end of the day, I decided that, I wanted to work and help students, and particularly the one-on-one environment and guiding and advising them. Um, but I also was still drawn, probably from my involvement as an undergrad, to the world of higher ed. So I was like,
hmm,
maybe I can make higher ed a career, which I
yeah.
never thought 4 years earlier, junior, senior year of high school, my mindset back then was I didn't belong in higher ed. And now I'm about to finish my degree and now I want to maybe go for my master's and make this my career. But yeah, that's what drew me to the program.
That's amazing. What did obtaining a master's degree mean to you personally? And I'm going to exclude family in this one because I really want to get into your mindset about this master's degree when you achieved it and you obtained it. What did it mean to you personally?
I would say it meant validation. Um, as a first generation college student, uh, earning a master's degree really felt like breaking through a ceiling, like a glass ceiling that I didn't even know existed when I was younger. When you're
Hmm.
younger, you hear about college as sort of this general
Oh yeah,
concept.
yeah. Hmm.
But so it really, for me, it symbolized mobility, um, and not just professionally, but also generationally. Like this was huge for me. It gave me confidence, I think, particularly that I belonged in higher ed, not just because of my academics and having the degree, but also professionally. I had earned this degree. I now studied the field of higher ed. I understood, or, I studied, what it meant to support and advise and work with college students. Like it was my ticket into starting my career. It also deepened, I think for me, getting the master's degree deepened my sense of responsibility, I think, because I knew with getting that degree, it also came with an opportunity.
Hmm.
Um, to influence higher ed systems, to support my future students in meaningful ways. And, I guess on a personal, just level, again, it felt like proof that I could set a long-term goal, and follow through. And, that was certainly validating as well.
That's awesome. Being a trio professional, what did you learn about yourself in all your roles?
I think I've learned, and again, I've held different roles, assistant coordinator, counselor, director now. I feel like through the work, um, I know that I'm most fulfilled uh, when I'm advocating for students,
Hmm.
uh, particularly those students who are navigating systems that aren't built for them. Because I know what
Hmm.
that's like. I'm empathetic
Hmm.
to that journey as a trio alum. So I learned that. I've also discovered that I think I'm a builder. Like I really enjoy building programs. I enjoy building partnerships, campus coalitions, getting the support we need. I know we'll talk about advocacy in a little bit, but I know that I know I have the potential in me to be a community builder. I've also learned, particularly now that I've been director for a little over 3 years now, that leadership is not about a title. That leadership is really about consistency and building trust with your team. I have the best team in the trio business. We have 7 people on our team, many of them who have actually been there longer than I have, twice as
Mm.
long as I have. Some that were there when I was a grad assistant and worked my way up and who've embraced me. I've embraced them. And we've worked together, and together we've learned about, as trio professionals, as a trio team, about resilience. And what that means for supporting our students, supporting our institutions as we navigate some difficult times, and really providing that steady leadership.
In that same vein of working in trio and all the things that you've done so far, what do you enjoy most working in the trio, not only community, but in your program outside of your community? Yeah.
So
What
I
do you enjoy
tell
most about it?
so I tell everyone on campus that I have the best job on campus. Um, I would say I feel genuinely called to do this work. For me, Trio is not just a job, it's certainly a career, but it's also personal.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
see the experiences of my students and I see myself in those experiences. I've lived those experiences. What do I enjoy most about the work? Definitely the students. It's always the students. Watching a first generation trio student realize for the first time that they belong in college never gets old. Um, I love those transformative moments. Definitely the moments when students and their confidence uh, replaces the doubt that they have, when confidence replaces doubt.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
also love the relational work of the relational nature of the work. Trio is not transactional. Trio as a program. Trio
Hmm.
is developmental. It's about relationships. I know that professionally with my work with students over the last decade and a half. I know
Hmm.
it from being a Trio alum, from the last 20 years. Um, and I love seeing also another aspect that I love about working in Trio. I love just our trio community. I love seeing our alumni come back. I've been doing it long enough that we have alumni come back, their parents, their leaders, their professionals. There's this nature, there's like this legacy to the work that is really empowering and deeply impactful. For me, working in trio, what I also love about it is the national community that we have. I've been privileged to be involved in a lot of different organizations and nonprofits and volunteer work and so on and so forth. And I would say that TRIO is one of the most mission-driven professional communities I've ever been part of. And, I'm thankful for that. The work changes lives, and I know that because it's changed mine.
Wonderful. So in the middle of all this, you've
Yep.
also pursued a doctoral program,
I know. What was I
which
thinking?
I was about to say, some would say, wow, what a brave thing to do. You're awesome. That's awesome that you're doing it. Others are going to give you this crazy look. What inspired your pursuit of more education?
Well, one thing I would say is, again, like my undergrad and my master's, I had a lot of support as far as, family and friends and supporting the mission, the goal I had of getting a higher degree and then a higher degree. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had that support at home, and in my personal life. I also had the support professionally. I have a wonderful part of none of this is happenstance. The reason why I've been able to be an assistant coordinator and then a coordinator and then an assistant director and a director is because I had an incredible supervisor who was my director for a number of years. We sort of came up the ranks together. And then she always advocated for me professionally, got me the promotions, that she thought I deserved. And then eventually when she, moved on from the trio world, she really pushed for me to be director. And, I was able to I have this wonderful opportunity. Along that same vein, she really advocated for me to, go for my, PhD. So when I got into my program, the first 2 years was certainly heavy in coursework where I couldn't be on campus regularly at work because I had to be on campus, at Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I got my PhD. She was supportive with that in terms of my work schedule, the commitment that, I needed to make for it. So I had that support. What inspired me? I think I think with my career, I wanted to continue making a deeper impact. Um, I think in undergrad, going for my BA, I learned about knowledge. I consumed knowledge. As a master's student, I was able to sort of question things more, challenge ideas, engage in that way. And I think for my PhD, I really saw it as an opportunity to create knowledge, to produce, original research, and also to have a deeper impact as far as, maybe career mobility down the road. So it just so happened that it took me 7 years, and so it was May 2022, finished the PhD, and within 6 months I was director of
Wow.
Trio. So, that helped as well. I would also say that ironically, or not so ironically, along the way of getting my PhD, I decided I wanted to try teaching after all at the college level. And I knew that getting the PhD would be a gateway for that. And actually now, over the last 2 years, I've been teaching for the higher ed student affairs master's program that I
Wow.
graduated from, you know, 13, 14 years ago.
That's phenomenal. Can you talk a little bit more about your doctoral journey? What was that like for you as you navigated that experience?
Sure. I would say that it was challenging intellectually. I will say that. We were held to, we were a small cohort. We were held at Lesley University Educational Studies program, and then I had three cognates in higher ed, social justice, and counseling. And yeah, so it required discipline. It required also being vulnerable. Part of, the work is particularly when you get to the dissertation stage is presenting, a proposal to a committee of, new ideas that you want to research and really putting yourself out there. My topic was on LGBTQ student experiences in higher ed uh, at institutions in the Bible Belt. So really
Mm-hmm.
looking at unique sociocultural experiences among those students.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was intense work. It was also vulnerable work because it was a topic I deeply cared about personally as well.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it though. Like I loved I never thought, you know, how do I want to say it? Most PhD programs, if you have a retention rate or a persistence rate of above 50%, you're doing pretty well. Because PhD programs, doctoral programs, they're known for, students not being able to, complete them for a variety of different reasons. They're so long and, demanding. And I never for a second thought about not finishing my PhD program at the beginning in 2015. Fall 2015, I didn't think it was going to take 7 years, but what I would say it's because I had the best senior advisor, Robin Roth, who I am still in touch with today. I had the best dissertation committee. Again, I had a supportive supervisor at work, and it just was a wonderful, milestone experience in my educational journey.
What did this doctoral journey teach you about yourself, and what was your biggest takeaway?
Two things. One would be, I think your voice matters. Part of, a doctoral journey is really finding your voice because this is the first time where you're really doing deep, impactful, original years long research.
Hmm.
So you're really trying to find your voice. So that took some time. It's there was some trial and error for me, but I think definitely your voice matters. And then one thing and I guess this is a lesson I've kind of carried for a long time now, but the persistence definitely beats the perfection.
Mm.
Persistence beats perfection. Um, it doesn't have to be perfect, particularly as you're revising your dissertation and, you're on year 4, 5, 6. When I dipped into year 7, I'm like, okay, I think it might be time to just, because one of my mentors that I had mentioned, Edie from undergrad, and, I stayed in touch with her and continue to as today, currently. But as I was going through undergrad, she said something, as of course she had her doctorate. She said one of her advisors once said to her, that the best dissertation is a done dissertation. And that's something that I always, years and years later when I was doing my doctoral work stuck with me. I think it was a pretty good dissertation too, but it definitely, it was done and that's what mattered.
Absolutely. You became the director of the TRIO Student Support Services program at Salem State.
Yeah.
You already shared some of the kind of familiarity you had with the program. You've already been kind of uh, involved. But how did this path unfold for you? And did you see it coming? Like a lot of directors would say, this kind of fell on my lap and now I have to do it. But how did it unfold for you?
Um, I would say I didn't see it coming at the beginning, definitely. When I was finishing my master's, getting the job at Salem State, the full-time job, transitioning from a grad assistant to an assistant coordinator, and kind of moving forward, particularly those early years, that was incremental growth. I definitely, as I moved along and, others maybe saw more, potential in me I would take on other responsibility. Um, but what I would say, and maybe this would be some advice I would give, to those that want to be a trio director one day or a director in higher ed, um, definitely you want to have a supportive supervisor. And if you feel stuck, um, you might not have the best, you might want to find another supervisor. Because for me, I had the best supervisor in the world. So when I came on as an assistant coordinator, and I'll say her name since I've been saying everyone else's name, my coordinator, uh, our coordinator at the at the program was a person named Martine Francois. She coordinated our science services for our trio students. She eventually became an assistant director. advocated for me to become a full coordinator. Eventually, she became an assistant coordinator, advocated for me to become an assistant director, advocated for me to become a full coordinator. When she became director, she advocated for me to be an assistant director. And of course, along that way, we worked 13 years together, a lot of collaboration, a lot of building up our trio program at Salem State. And so that was huge. So it unfolded organically, but I think by the time I was the assistant director and she was the director, and that was about a period of 5 or 6 years, she was really training me on things like annual performance reports and grant writing and budgets and all of that. So I did feel I probably have had some of the best on the job trio training in trio history. So I'm very grateful for that.
Can you talk about your program and the students you serve?
Sure. So like all other trio student support services programs, we serve first generation, low income, and students with disabilities. We work with up to 325 students, so it's a pretty large program compared to a
That's
lot of
huge.
others. We have 7 full-time staff members that are all coordinators. We also have a trio office manager who provides our administrative support. And then serve as director. We provide tutoring, we provide holistic advising, academic coaching. We provide support around financial aid and financial literacy. We work with students if they find themselves on academic warning or probation. We also really we do not operate in a deficit model, I really learned and appreciated my experience at UNH Trio as a student, that I was always valued and seen as a student that belonged there. And I wanted to make sure as director that I paid that forward with my students. So we're about community building. We give students work study opportunities as well. We do programming, we do events, we do an annual celebration each year where we try to invite, a congressional representative to come and, see our students, hear their stories and recognize their successes.
Awesome. What have been some of your challenges and successes as a director?
I think challenges have been, not so much institutional, but I would say, much like a lot of national trio programs, directors might answer, we're dealing with funding uncertainty. Obviously, the current presidential administration, had proposed about a year ago now to zero out trio programs for this coming fiscal year. We learned in the last week or two that that was all rejected, thankfully, and added back in through appropriations on a bipartisan congressional basis. So we are funded through 26, 27, and, hopefully onward. But, I think, navigating these political narratives, making sure that we are telling the stories of our students. Those have certainly been challenges, that we've, had to maneuver. As far as successes, particularly as director, I'm very proud of Salem State and its relationship to our trio programs. A lot of institutions, may have a trio program, but not fully understand, what a trio program is, or why can't you work with every student, or, what is trio, depending, because it's not, it is of the university or college, but it's also we have other areas that we're accountable to with the federal government. So there's always that duality. And I'm very proud, and I think it's a huge success that Salem State University is 100% supportive
That's
of
awesome.
our trio program. They have our they support us completely. I'll even say when, a year ago we were worried about, maybe being defunded or canceled, which we've learned a lot of programs that were canceled, we have found, you know, were canceled illegally, and now we're going through that process of, in the courts to make sure that, and injunctions and so on and so forth to make sure that's rectified. At the time when we didn't know necessarily where we were going to be a year from now,
Yeah.
or to the present day, Salem State did say that our team would not be unemployed and our students would not be not served. So they were willing to support us through the storm, and we're very grateful for that. Thankfully, we survived the storm for now, and I know we're going to talk about advocacy in a little bit, but yeah, we continue moving forward.
Are there certain goals you have for your program?
I'd like us to continue to sustain our graduation rates. We do very well, it with, comparably to the region. I'd also like to find ways to expand leadership development opportunities for students. We do a lot of focus, as I mentioned, on the advising, the coaching, the tutoring, those financial aid, which, those pieces are all critical for their, persistence and ultimately their graduation. But I think that, they have the potential to lead. They are our leaders. They're one day going to join the 5 or 6 million TRIO alum that we have, over the last 60 years. And, I want them to be part of that. So I think creating leadership opportunities and expanding those opportunities for our students will be, a goal that, I want to carry forward.
Absolutely. What is one of your favorite memories as a director? So far in your experience, do you have a memory that sticks out or an event that you've really enjoyed, or maybe even a coaching moment with a student?
Sure. Sure. So this would be a memory that I've had with many different students. So it's sort of a recurring memory, and it was pretty easy to think of. And it was definitely watching a trio student, watching that first generation student cross the stage at graduation, particularly when you know the challenges that they've overcome. And then watching their family and their friends celebrate uh, in the stands. That's I've gone to every commencement that we've had, since I've, worked at Salem State and with Trio. So that's about, I don't know, 13 or 14 of them. And that moment never gets old.
Wow, that's awesome. Trio programs have faced a lot of challenges this past year, as you already noted. How have you readied your staff for these challenges?
So I've been transparent with them. Honestly, there's nothing to hide. It's in the news. So I thought, I feel like transparent communication is critical. Um, I've talked to them about, because this is our livelihoods as well. And so I've been very, candid about that. And I've told them, that I'm doing everything I can as far as, you know, advocating for funding, educating myself on policy and current events, particularly the day-to-day and, on the national scene and Congress and the White House and, keeping track of that. Along the way, too, because I do feel that it's a responsibility as trio director. I've also tried to steady the ship because it's obviously very easy and maybe a go-to thing to panic during times like
Oh,
this.
sure thing. Yeah,
And
yeah.
what I've tried to do, particularly with the team and with our students as well, has been to center the trio mission over the fear, to really focus on the day-to-day work and know that, and hope and know and have faith. And I'm a person of faith, so that helps as well, that it will work out. Um, so that's sort of how I've moved forward with, the challenges. And I know we'll talk about advocacy as well, but that's certainly how I've dealt with the day to day.
Well, Kevin, you've done a great job of like segueing into the next question that I feel like I'm repeating myself. But no, 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 this is great. I love that you're talking about advocacy and working with your staff and being transparent because I think transparency is a super important thing to have in any position, whether you're a supervisor or if you're the employee working for a supervisor, that transparency is just like that very top priority thing.
Mhm.
So when in terms of advocacy, the advocacy has just been kind of the centerpiece for the longevity of TRIO programs because they receive a lot of public support. What is
Mhm.
advocacy to you? What does it mean to you? And what are some things the public can do to continue protecting TRIO programs?
I think in terms of, I'll take the second question first, in terms of continuing to protect TRIO programs. So TRIO programs are federally funded. They've been around for, I think last year was our 60th year. And this year will be our 50th year at Salem State. So we've been
Wow.
around for a lot of it as well.
Hmm.
So with anything that we advocate for at the national level in terms of federal funding, call your legislators, host campus visits, invite them to your campuses, share student success stories. Um, I think what we're talking about here, and this is a larger issue, is protecting access to education. This is a social
Mm.
justice
Hmm.
issue. This is a civil rights issue. It's not happenstance that TRIO programs emerged in the 60s and 70s outside within the civil rights movement. Because we were fighting all sorts of things, for all sorts of things during that period of time about rights, about access, about equity and equality. And
Hmm.
TRIO's part of that history. And we see a lot of these different things, a lot of just people, unfortunately, being attacked and discriminated against now. And so the fight isn't over. I think we've entered a new chapter of, however you want to describe the era, but, another renewed era of it's our own chapter of the civil rights movement,
Hmm.
where we need to be advocating nationally, locally, statewide, to make sure that our students have access to higher education, that they have access to the resources that they need. Um, Advocacy really has a lot to do about speaking your truth, about defending what is right and showing what you value, and then
Hmm.
carrying out actions so that the values that you hold are protected. In addition to being director of a TRIO program, I, I had the honor this past year of serving as the president of our Massachusetts TRIO State Association. And that really gave me an appreciation and a deeper understanding of what it means to advocate, statewide. And so that's made a huge difference and was consequential, candidly. I think about 12 or 13 TRIO programs in Massachusetts were illegally canceled. Um, by the current, presidential administration, and they're going through a process right now, as I mentioned, of appealing, and they're winning. They
Hmm.
are winning those appeals. But being able to do that work means, calling the Senate and Congress, representative phone lines in the House, and leaving messages with education aides, and making sure your senator or House representative knows what's going on. I also have the opportunity this coming year, starting in September. I'm the incoming president of our New England Educational Opportunity Association, which now I get to sort of expand that work regionally across the six New England states, and sit on our national trio board with the Council for Opportunity in Education. And they've been on the forefront of advocating. So if you ever go to one of, their conferences or workshops, often they'll do a trio history and they'll talk about how in this, trio programs were born out of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Flash forward 1970s, Congress or a president tries to cut trio programs. They fight back. 1980s, Reagan administration, they call it the 12-Day War, before I was born, where, they tried to cut trio programs, zero them out. They lost that battle. Trio programs stayed and actually got an increase in funding. Same thing in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and now it seems like every 10 years or so, trio programs are questioned or under attack, or their overall impact and effectiveness are questioned. And yet here we are 60 years later, still, in place, still thriving, still serving students, while a lot of those naysayers are out of office, or are on the ash heap of
Yes.
history. And so we're proud of our movement, but that movement, our trio history, is because of the advocacy, and and so we need to keep it going. Like, now this is our fight, this is our
Absolutely.
time.
Absolutely. Looking ahead, what do you see yourself doing in 5 to 10 years?
I don't know, Juan. I would say I'd love to still be involved with trio, whether it's in my current role or something similar. I'd love to maybe, I've been, now I guess I'm late, early to mid-career. I don't know how I classify it, but I'm about year 15 now. So maybe moving into an opportunity of not just mentoring trio students, but other trio colleagues and professionals as they launch and, begin their own careers. I'd love to expand on my own research and scholarship. Maybe write more, maybe publish down the road. Um, and then maybe some executive leadership opportunities as well, put that doctorate to use depending on, you know, where life takes me.
Some would say you're already putting it to use.
Well, thank you.
Uh, in in that little callback that you had mentioned, you said you want to mentor trio professionals. Here's the moment for you to just kind of, what advice would you have for beginners, intermediate, or advanced trio professionals who are listening to this podcast? Let's give a taste
Sure.
of how your mentorship would look like.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. So I did think about this. So there'd be three things that I would suggest or encourage. One is to take care of yourself. Hopefully from the history I just shared, uh, those listening can tell that this is the long game and this is a long haul. And often the forces that want to undermine college access and the good work of TRIO are relying on us getting tired out. But we have to keep fighting and keep moving and keep moving forward, for our students, for ourselves, for our programs. And to do that, you have to take care of yourself. So to practice self-care, to make sure that you're energized. Before we knew the outcome of a lot of these legal cases at the end of the holiday season, at the end of this past year, a few of my trio colleagues and I got together for a workshop or training, and afterwards one of the speakers said, okay, now go home, celebrate the holidays with your family, rest up, because in 2026 we have to get back to the fight. And for us to be successful, we need to be energized. We need to take care of our well-being, ourselves, our families, our personal lives, have that balance. So that would be my first piece of advice. My second piece would be never underestimate your influence. Uh, I never thought uh, at any stage, whether when I was in high school, as an undergrad, getting my master's, getting my Ph.D., starting out in trio professionally, that I would be able to be a state president for trio or a regional president for trio, or sit on a national trio board. Um, that sort of unfolded for me. A lot of times it was surprising. A lot of times it was people who I admire and look up to and, you know, just think are extraordinary trio pioneers reaching out to me saying, yeah, you can do this too now. Like it's your turn. And so don't underestimate, what you can bring to the table as a trio professional. And then the last piece of advice I would say, and this kind of ties in with the advocacy piece. When you're advocating for your programs, lead with heart and lead with evidence. And we know you have the heart because if you're working, you're not doing it for the money. So if you're working in the TRIO program, it's because you care about your students, you want them to be successful, the mission matters to you. So hold on to that because not every program, not every institution, not every higher ed, whatever, necessarily has that kind of heart. So hold on to that. And the other thing is lead with the evidence. And the evidence that you have is not, I mean, we have the data, and, as long as people read it. And, if anyone, I highly encourage, you know, our federal leaders in Washington to read the evidence because it's right
Mm-hmm.
there that our programs
Mm-hmm.
are successful. But your evidence, the best evidence as a trio professional for you to lead with is your students' stories. Talk about students and their successes, how they've gotten into college if they're upward bound, that they persisted through college if they're SSS, that they've earned their degree if they're a PhD, if they are a McNair program, and all the other wonderful TRIO programs that we have. Tell those stories, bring your students to your representatives, to your senators, make sure those students tell those critical stories.
Some wonderful advice for TRIO professionals. So, what about advice for TRIO participants, whether they're pre-college, in college, or looking to grad school?
So I say this as someone who works with TRIO students. I say this just as someone who is a TRIO alum, was a TRIO student, uh, who was in middle school, trying to get through high school, applying to undergrad, applying to master's, applying to my PhD. Please remember that you belong. Um, Ask questions, do your due diligence, do the hard work. But remember that you belong and that your story is powerful.
What is something you are currently reading, watching, or listening to?
So I'll say so. So I'll say something boring and then I'll say something maybe funny. I don't know. But so as far as things I'm reading, so I am teaching two graduate level courses right now in the master's program at Salem State in higher ed. So a lot of leadership textbooks, student development theory, so I
Oh, you're
am
going for
reading
the really
those.
dry stuff.
I'm reading though. Well, I have to read those so then I know what I'm talking about when I talk. And the grad students, they ask questions.
Yeah.
They know if you don't know what you're talking about. So I make sure I'm prepared there. And then I got to go with, what I did just mention. I just finished rewatching Lord of the Rings for the 50th time, about 30,000 feet above sea level flying home today. And then I'm a huge fan, and some people, especially younger listeners, aren't even going to know this show. I'm a huge fan of Murder, She Wrote. Um, this show is about, it stars Angela Lansbury. She's this 70-year-old older woman who's this busybody that just loves learning about people, and it's a campy 1980s show, and she solves like murder mysteries along the way, and she's a busybody and just likes to get involved in people's lives just like I do. So,
Wonderful things. Wonderful things. I hope the audience gets to check it out. Except for maybe the dry textbooks.
It's on streaming. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a song that would serve as your anthem?
I like, so we're planning on, with the COE, COE is about to do its annual policy seminar where we're going to be advocating on a Capitol Hill, for our programs and our TRIO funding. And one of the rally events that we have, we're going to be doing, people are going to come up and down, and we actually had to identify a walk-up song. And so the one that we all picked as a group that I am also a fan of is Fight the Power by Public Enemy.
So
I will go with that. I will go with that one.
Using only one word, describe yourself.
Resilient.
Amazing. Dr. Kevin David Linton. Sorry, read the words all together. TRIO SSS Director at Salem State University. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Again, I love talking about TRIO. It gave me access, confidence, direction in my life, my development, my education, my career, and it's always great to talk about TRIO and to honor that legacy.
Absolutely. We have a tradition on the Let's Talk TRIO podcast where we have the guests sign off. We are at the end of this podcast. Do you care to do the honors?
I would love to. Hi, TRIO listeners. This is Dr. Kevin David Linton, TRIO alum, first-generation graduate, and director of the TRIO Student Support Services Program at Salem State University. I am living proof that access plus support equals transformation. If TRIO opened a door for you, hold it open for someone else. TRIO works.
Are you a participant, alum, or staff of a TRIO program? Do you want your program highlighted? You or your program could be featured in an upcoming episode of Let's Talk TRIO. Get a hold of us by going to our Facebook page or Instagram and send us a direct message. Search for Let's Talk TRIO. We want to get your story to the public.
You just heard from our guest, Dr. Kevin David Linton, TRIO SSS Director at Salem State. Thank you, Dr. Linton, for being on the podcast and sharing your TRIO journey. Remember, if you would like to be on the Let's Talk TRIO podcast or know a staff, advocate, participant, or alumni, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. A heartfelt thanks to our individual supporters, Angelica Villalpando, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jeff Naputi, Angelica Valdez, Rosario Riley, Felicia Rivera, Eric Lemaster, Jeff Calden, and Jaded Electronics. Thank you to our corporate sponsors, TRIOJoblist.com, Nosotros Education Center, Longsdale Publishing, Student Access, and the TRIOstore.com, powered by Proforma. Visit www.thetriostore.com, your source for TRIO graduation stoles. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. Remember, you too can be a sponsor of the Let's Talk TRIO podcast in one of three ways. Become a monthly patron on Patreon. Our base level starts at $1 a month. Become a corporate sponsor by placing an ad on the podcast. Contact us for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast business PayPal account. Our business handle is Let's Talk TRIO. I'd like to take a moment to thank our honorary members of the Let's Talk TRIO podcast, Roderick Chambers, Tony O, Scott Kendall, and Susan Cramp. The Let's Talk TRIO podcast team is John Russell, audio engineer, music producer and composer, and post-production editor. Amelia Castañeda, script supervisor, Marketing Manager, Social Media Manager, and Producer. Juan Rivas, Executive Producer and Host. Be sure to follow the Let's Talk Trio podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. This episode was recorded Saturday, February 14th, 2026. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.